Hello and welcome everyone. Just a moment as I solve this black screen. All right. Hello. Welcome everyone. Um, we'll be doing something very educational today, I hope. Try going over the decks that were played in the top cut of the Spanish Kotei, which, with a little brag, I was one myself. Made to top 4. What we'll be doing, I'll be going over the decks. I played a lot of these decks during Swiss as well, so I actually managed to play a lot of the against the top cut decks myself. So be able to give my insight as it from a Lion player's perspective, but I'll try to go over them as objectively as possible. What do I think is their game plan? What do I think are their strengths, their weaknesses? What interesting things were maybe done with the deck? As you'll see, we'll be starting with the lower place decks going up, but depending if there's maybe like a group of decks like spoilers, there's going to be 3 House of Light decks. I might group those together and cover them and their differences together. Twitch chat will be open on my right. If there's anyone with any questions, I'll try to answer them. And I'll relay the question for those watching the VOD or just listening to the VOD. All right, and without further ado, let's begin with the only top cut Scorpion, which happened to be my opponent in the top 16, which was Alejandro Calero, who brought, as far as I understand it, like the by K. Curry and such popularized Lion Splash, which includes Regal Bearing for starters. I think most Scorpion decks will play it as a 2-off. And Alejandro, in this case, chose for 2 ready for battles, which is personally interesting. That usually indicates you're more thinking about crane opponents, I would say, because most meta decks, especially Crab, don't really use bow effects. Lion has got a few interesting ones in the Akodo Mastermind, but usually they don't bow people in a conflict to stop them. So interesting choice, personally. Now this deck itself, it's a very, like, in my opinion, aggressive deck. What Scorpion can do, and what I think this deck's game plan mainly is to at least assure that you break on political every turn. I think almost all Scorpion decks have the option to have a 4-turn political break on the stronghold. Of course, there are some matchups, some province rows where this deviates. But in general, Scorpion is just so powerful on the political side. There's usually very little that any other clan will be able to do to stop them from a turn 4 political victory. This deck, as most people will know it, I think leverages that's the most with the Alibi Artist and the Baishu Liar, on top of the conflict Shosogo Sadako, which is a cheap but pretty good powerhouse, especially if they become dishonored by stealing an opponent's attachment. Some interesting includes in Alejandro's deck were the 2 Kireko, which I think is generally pretty useful in all matchups currently. If you're on Scorpion Splash or if you're on a Scorpion deck, I think this is a pretty good card to include, especially for Swiss. Like, this will catch out so many people in Swiss, which potentially wins you the game. Discard's Pursuit is, of course, like a pretty... Is it a staple, I would say? It's a pretty good include for all of the Shinobi decks. I mean, -4 military counteract Banzai while your Banzai goes through. And, of course, Sadako is a Shinobi, so very easily give the 3 power to Sadako. And, of course, the Artist is a Shinobi, so it's a good target for it. The Shadow Stalker is still a pretty decent target for it, even though it gets hampered by 1 power. Takao activates its ability, and the Silent Enforcer isn't hampered by it, so it's a -4 military swing, usually, which has a good place among all the Shinobi being played. Now, for the rest, there isn't much to talk about, I think. There's, of course, one of Kachiko, which is very powerful, and I always like to see a Scorpion run this. I think it's part of the I'm going to win on political eventually package. Just a card which the clans generally don't have much of an answer to. It could get bowed, of course, like Crane could potentially bow this character with a dojo, or Dragon could send it home. But aside from potentially having its power taken away, it will usually get like the biggest character out of the conflict with the opponent, which could be backbreaking. On the Dynasty side, we see the, I think, usual thing, acclaimed geisha houses. 1 City of Lights is interesting, but definitely not weird, giving some of the like 1 cost events. So I think a wall of copy is definitely like a nice thing to see. 2 Failable Grounds is pretty... To be honest, I would have to look this up, but like Open Window... Because Open Window is a rally card, it only works specifically with Shinobi and can only move to the conflict. Now, it can potentially... It can potentially like stay available for longer, but doesn't also give that 1 province strength, so that's something you might want to include. Like it doesn't cost a deck slot, and if Shinobi are the case, then maybe it's worth including this over Fable Ground, but I don't think one or the other is better or worse or wrong. I can definitely see Fable Ground just being the more reliable option in this case over the value option of Open Window. On the Dynasty side, nothing really... There's a few things that jump out, but nothing like huge. Of course, new character that Scorpion got, Silent Enforcer, which lets the opponent make a choice, either bow or send home a 3 cost or less when the Scorpion player plays an event. So definitely good control tool to push through for a conflict. Aggressive tool. Could be used on defense. Depends, of course, this is the second conflict of the turn. Am I able to attack with the Silent Enforcer, like use it with Kyuden Baishi? Those kind of things. Denmaru, which, funny story from my actual game against Alejandro, I saw Denmaru like first turn, and I was like sitting with 2 or 3 Tactical Ingenuity in my hand. I was going like, Like, my only calling in favor is target enemy is actually playing a character which could steal it. Which is an interesting interaction. I don't think it's backbreaking, but it didn't end up being buff. So I never saw his potential really realized, especially since the Lion matchup could be a matchup where he does things, but he's usually not an include in my Scorpion decks because of his relatively, I would say, low power level, yeah. Because if he's Dishonored, he's a 1-0, which, given that there's no native commander synergy in Scorpion, and even if you would splash Lion, you would only able to splash. Is Tactical Ingenuity splash bound? The other option would be like even the odds or prepare for war. I don't know if it says if I look at alibi artist. It doesn't say on this page. Okay, that's not much help. But yeah, I don't know if it's possible to splash Tactical Ingenuity, but that's like the only synergy point. There's not much going on for commanders unless you care about being honored or discarding attachments from your character. Which Scorpion in this instance probably does not. I would assume, yeah, and I think the only Scorpion commander is like the 4-drop from Core Set, which probably doesn't do much. There's also Toucan Sato, which is interesting. Although, given what's on the Scorpion side, there's really only synergy with For Shame, and there's only like Fine Katana and Banzai to pump up the military skill. Of course, Gensato doesn't care about being dishonored, so him winning a duel is not a problem. It's an interesting include. It didn't come into play in our game. I didn't manage to get his opinion on it. I also don't. Yeah, I saw it. It was on the flip in one of the turns, but it wasn't bought. Of course, it ignores attachments, which is like an interesting. It's interesting against Crab and Dragon, I guess. Although Crab do have some like pretty high base military skill character, so you're only relying on Banzai. I don't think the synergy with this deck is high enough to really justify him. I think it's an interesting include, but not many further opinions. So as far as my game against Alejandro went, it was basically for my deck, which we'll get to. He's just too fast, too big stats on political, especially for my deck to really counter, depending on what I find. As I said, I had tactical ingenuities in hand, but I didn't actually find a commander during our game until like maybe the third turn. I do think, yes. And so, what my game plan is against the Scorpion is just make them dishonor. And that's what ended up happening in the end. I was lucky my upholding authority found the Kachiko, which will go over my stronghold province, but it's dishonorable assault. So it would always be a 0-3, but still the character could remove some potential potential political power for me, so I was happy to find that character and discard it with Upholding Authority. But yeah, I I think usually as Lion, you're too slow with most Lion decks. Even something like Honor Lion just probably outraces and makes it difficult to defend against. And so yeah, he was on Stronghold. I defended a few times very closely, and Scorpion ended up being dishonored. But yeah, it has a bit of a value province roll with two Earth provinces with Secret of Earth, Coach's Greeting, Effective Deception, which are good provinces to either get resources out of your opponent, which you cancel, or by bowing their character, or just canceling it with Effective Deception, or you defend. Abandoning Honor is like a gotcha province. It was in the row against me, but I mean, I wasn't on a conquest game plan, so I was basically scouting and poking, trying to win some rings, air ring or earth ring for advantages. Potentially this does catch out some big characters when in the row, when stumbled into. It doesn't have something like a mark of shame to immediately activate it, but it could be a good gotcha. That's the nature of Swiss. So yeah. So this deck, it ended up in the top cut with I I think the Scorpion Hatamoto, which he was, challenged in, so there wasn't actually a 5-1 or better Scorpion. I think this deck is good. I I don't have much of an overview how well it would do into like a Mitsu deck or like a more general Lion deck. I think with the forgeries and such, it would have to stand a chance. And with the Curse Catcher, if it can find a Curse Catcher to quickly and efficiently deal with like Restoration into Dragon or something, or Upholding Authority, I think it could have a good matchup against those. But my general inexperience with playing this sort of deck can't give any absolutes about that. All right, so yeah, for those listening into chat, feel free to jump in or give any opinions at any point, or ask any questions. But yeah, as Twitch chat says, the meta check how well does it do against Mitsu? That will probably be my. And I'm going to say it early. I don't think Mitsu 2 decks are overpowered in any sense. I do think they're one of the top meta decks, but by no means do I think they are broken to such a point that there needs to be anything done about them. But because I played a lot of them, they will generally be my point of reference, and because I do think they are the best deck. And I will also check the decks and like, does it seem like they have any includes to combat that matchup? Yes or no? In this instance, I don't think so. The Curse Catcher is a pretty generally good card, but in my opinion would be more targeted towards the Dragon matchup because of their provinces. But in general, Discourage Pursuit is good into Mitsu because it can shut down Void Fist on some of your characters, especially because you are playing the. Actually, only playing 2 Calling in favors, and no other. Yeah, and no other attachment removal except 2 Disciple of Shinsei on the. But I would definitely replace those with Mia Mystics. So yeah, I do think that's a weak point of the deck. It somehow only dealing with 2 pieces of conflict attachment removal, and it's playing Shinsei instead of Mia Mystic. Like, that's a criticism you can have. All right. I think we're going to move on to the next one, which was one of my. Okay, no, wait. It's High Hours of Light. I'm going to delay the High Hours of Light decks. Let's jump to the 4th dragon in the top cut. But surprisingly, we do have a an Iron Mountain Castle dragon in the top cut, which does make some interesting decisions on the splash side. So baseline, what we have here is the Niten Master deck with some changes and interesting options. I like a few things which I'm seeing here, which I do think are part of the meta. But in general, what does this deck do? It focuses on the character Niten Master, which has 2 times per round it can ready after a weapon is equipped to it. The Dragon Stronghold Iron Mountain Castle allows you to have 3 restricted attachments, so you can more easily attach like a 3rd weapon to him, which he then, like One Piece style, probably equips in his teeth. Who knows? It is supported by the Swordsmith, general investigators to get problem cards for the matchup out of the hand. It does play like a Disguised Dragon character, because it also plays the Teacher of Empty Thought, which is the one if you play 3 or more cards, you draw a card during a conflict. So that's a bit of a tempo. And the deck also plays 3 Seal of the Dragon, because I guess Void Fist is just too good not to play. And even while we deviate somewhat in Dragon decks, we still gotta be able to play Monks and Void Fist. So yeah, we play 3 Seal of the Dragons. On the other side, it uses Sacred Sanctuary as its restricted card, which of course, because it isn't fully a Monks, it isn't playing with me, so it doesn't need to play 5 cards a conflict. It chose the very defendable Stronghold province in Sacred Sanctuary. The rest of the row is kind of standard: Restoration, Upholding Authority, Pursuit of Justice. Maybe the Sacred Sanctuary is in the row, but I don't think so. The Pursuit of Justice will probably go in the row. And then Pilgrimage. Now, for the splash, usually what this deck does is take the very powerful Crab card, which is also a weapon, which is the 0 cost Pathfinder's Blade, which is 0 cost +1/+0 weapon. And it has the interrupt: when a province effect would initiate, discard this attachment and you negate the province effect, which is good to negate opponent's restoration of balance, opponent's upholding authority. Like any problem province you have, you could trade your conflict card for it, which also happens to be a weapon, which you can already need to master. But the weird thing is that this deck isn't actually running Pathfinder's Blade, because it's a Keeper of Fire deck. It's actually running 2 Jade Tetsubo from Crab, 2 Jade Inlaid Katana. For people who don't know this card, it's one of the Crab cards from Under Full-Length Shadow. It's also a weapon, 1 cost, fine Katana stats, which has reaction: after attached character wins a conflict, choose a participating character with 1 or more status tokens on it. Remove 1 fate from that character. I think this is a very interesting include. Definitely targeted towards either... I mean, in general, like things in L5R these days will probably have some sort of status token on it. Of course, it won't be tainted. You won't see that in Constructed, but Honored, Dishonored, definitely good for Lion matchups, Crane matchups, Scorpion matchups even, or potentially Mitsu because Swell of Seafoam honors a character. So yeah, 2 Jade Tetsubo, 2 Jade in late Katana, and then 3 Tetsubo of Blood, which is one of the Maho crab weapon for 4 military power for 1 fate. So Q-ting with Iron Mountain Castle, which has the interrupt to reduce the cost of an attachment you're going to play once a turn. If you reduce the Tetsubo Blood to 0, of course you don't have to pay any fate of characters as well. So you completely negate that quote-unquote downside of the weapon. So yeah, Javier, I think that's how you say it, or Javier, I don't know, I think it's Javier, um, chose to like really go into the weapon stuff and really play into military power or the Niten Master in general. Made it to top 16 with it. I don't know who his opponent was, but aside from that, other noticeable stuff. So yeah, didn't decide for Seeker roll, but Keeper roll, which gives Defend Your Honor, which is of course one of the main reasons to go into Keeper for most military clans. Has included 2 Ayabuna pilots, so either counting on punching through a Void Fist after the Nita Master readies with a weapon, or was thinking of the Unicorn matchup. In general, I'm not a fan of Ayabuna pilot includes if you don't have like a better option in clan to move in. I think in Dragon, I see no reason to play this over Hawk Tattoo, especially if you're playing Seal of the Dragon. But of course, it's 0 fate against 1 fate of the Hawk Tattoo, which could, of course, always matter. But yeah, if you need move in tech, Ayabuna Pilot from the new set, which is yet to be released from Legacy, but these cards, like Ayabuna Pilot and Disarm, were released early because they open up deck building options. But yeah, if you need move in, it's probably your sort of go-to if your clan is low on them. Other than that, things that stand out is the one of Togashi Kazue, the conflict character, which it's a power include, right? I really don't hate it as a one-off, especially because you can play this for 2 fate. And it has some interesting implications. This could be attack against Mitsu. Like if Mitsu is on 0 fate and he has to rely on the stronghold to keep 1 fate, this could counter it. Of course, it all sort of depends. Can you keep the character into the conflict? You have Defend Your Honors, which should help you with that. Does the opponent dragon have a let go, which you might need to counter? I think it's very cute. I think there's nothing wrong with this include. I think power includes like this Togashi Kazue could be very impactful and win you games. So I definitely don't hate it, and it could be a potential good include against maybe if there would be any Tower Lions or the Mitsu in this case. Deck is running 2 Phoenix Tattoos, which is the Fire Roll restricted Dragon card, which gives everything Pride in the conflict. I'm not super convinced by this card, but in a deck like this where it's go hard with huge stats very quickly, this could potentially hamper a lot of characters and just be a good power boost for 0 to 1 phase. Like, there's definitely nothing wrong with it. So because the deck is running 3 Seal of the Dragon, it's also running 2 Swell of Seafoam and 3 Void Fist. Now, if I have to be honest, the Swell of Sea Foam loses some potential value because it might not honor because your only keyholes are Hurricane Punch and Void Fist. Which might be awkward in some conflicts, but I guess the stand is worth something if you're not playing with like a Niten Master and you're playing with a few of the like Mon characters which they have here in the Dynasty side. Um, so yeah, combine the best events of Monks with Niten Master and a very aggressive weapon splash for Crab, which doesn't include Pathfinder's Blade, and you have Javier's Iron Mountain Castle Niten Master deck. I didn't encounter him during the Swiss or the Top Cut. I do like this kind of deck as an alternative for Dragon. I do think there's a lot of power in Nita Master and this deck in general. It definitely tests opponents' knowledge of what attachments are important. It while still very much in its own game plan, without like taking into account too much of the meta, it does feel a little bit more tact against some options than Mitsu can or is in general. Stuff like the Jaden Late Katana and the Kazue are definitely and then the Defend Your Honor, which definitely give a little bit of more control and like removing power from the board, I guess, is I would say, like the Jaden Late Katana, which removes fate, and the Kazue, who removes fate. That can take out some key cards from your opponent's board, while strengthening your own in case of the Kazue. So after playing 2 Overlooked Communities, which is the holding for Dragon, which lets you return a ring and remove a status token. Which is interesting, I would say. Definitely good versus Crane, Lion, Scorpion, potentially. Unlike a Sadako or something. And I think this deck can definitely like win a ring. That's not far-fetched. So I definitely don't hate it. There's one Mirumoto Dojo, which is a cool include. I think it's definitely given the no duelists except Raitsugu. I think that's fine. Like just a value option, like remove a fate. Even if it goes back to the opponent's pool, you might remove three or more fate worth of character with a good ability from the board next turn. That's definitely worth it. All right, interesting deck. Glad to see it represented. To even with dragons already massive representation, to at least like have another one, like another deck than Mitsutu. All right. Onto the only Crane in the top cup, which is our well-known Jincito, or Pablo. I'm just going to keep it at Pablo. I don't remember the full name. I think Jincito. I can't remember if he went 5-1. Let me get the stats, but I think he challenged in. Yeah, he, like myself, he challenged in with 4-2, and I think that was like the. Yeah, and he was Crane Automoto. So what did Jincito bring? He actually brought Dragon Splash. um, I'm sorry. I'm just laughing at how standard it is. At first glance. Um, but I this is definitely not a criticism of Jincito. I think it's very easy to just still have to be in a very standard um build for Crane just because of how fate intensive your character buys need to be. So being efficient with let goes as the attachment removal instead of the one fate disarm is definitely a good reasoning. And of course, Tattooed Wanderer is a good tech and offensive card if it needs to be. And Hark to 2 is also this is fulfills sort of the same um, goal as the Tattooed Wanderer in just being move in slash COVID defense. Um, is there anything that would stand out here? Of course, Proving Ground is a restricted card. Daidoji Iron Warrior is sort of the go-to Crane character I see Juncito play. It's definitely a very polarizing character if the opponent has a more reactive slash control sort of hand, and with control sort of hand, I mean a control hand that doesn't deal with winning the conflict necessarily, but is more like late game oriented, like maybe disarms for more important attachments or yeah, those sort of things rather than attachments that can easily be played onto the board. Because the Daidoji Warrior, if it wins the conflict, both players discard to 4 cards, which, given Jinsito's very playable 15 attachment, sort of low cost conflict side, definitely favors the Crane more than most other clans slash opponents. We see 2x, or 2 times Asahina Takamori, which is the focus character which prevents other characters from being declared during a conflict. Hey, which if the opponent doesn't find Mitsu turn 1, and you find this, and you can buy this, and then next turn you can buy Hotaru, or you can buy... Okay, there's only Hotaru. So in case of the Dragon matchup against Mitsu, it would have to be Hotaru, and that's like the only buy. But I mean, in general, the character is still pretty powerful, right? It's a 4-cost 3/3 because it will generally be honored, and it's just a nicer character for a turn, which of course gets better the more tower focused the opponent's deck is, or the lower on moving the opponent's deck is. And I don't think there's like a huge amount of movement, so Takamori definitely will be able to find its value. The rest of the conflict side is pretty standard. Maybe the Masterpiece Painter are like the only like visible like sort of flexible card, but of course it's only it's just more card draw, right? It's to in general shore up the like the relative weakness of Crane, which is card draw. But given most of the things in the deck, like Proving Ground, if it's found, should be the biggest attributed to that. Maybe one of the like jump out cards on the conflict side is like Elegance and Grace. It's like the right hand of the Emperor slash cavalry reserves for Crane. It's a 2-cost event where you can ready 2 honored characters worth 6 or less. But yeah, there's is generally it's what you'd expect. Like one story defeat. I really like story defeat. I wish more Crane players would at least bump this to a 2x. Like this is such a mentally taxing card to remember for opponents, and it's a flat out bow for most scenarios. So I really like this card, and you can then have the option to pay 1 honor to dishonor the character. But for the rest, yeah, this is like basically what Crane does generally, and the inflexibility of Crane's cards, because they generally don't go in any other direction than buy characters with enough fate and be efficient and try to hold on and break that way, while standing with return the offense. Yeah. To be honest, with a keeper role, something I would like to see in Crane decks with keeper roles is maybe include a couple of crippling taxes in your dynasty side. Crippling taxes is the dynasty event for 0, which is keeper restricted, which says discard any amount of cards in 1 provinces. Given a bit of first player luck, this could remove a important character on the other side of the field. It's your very efficient season of war for one very specific threat on the opponent's side, which, given something like Mitsu exists, or like any other good impactful character in any other clan, or even dynasty event in any other clan, I think if you're on keeper, not including 3x crippling taxes is like, it's such a waste not to do it, in my opinion. I do get it. You need a character because you don't have any good, like, big body conflict characters. In this deck, at least, I do think you have a few options in, like, maybe like a political rival, or if you really wanted, like, the Daidoji Iron Warrior in conflict, like the 3-cost 3 one. So, but yeah, your dynasty row already can clogged up with your holding, so adding a non-rally dynasty event feels bad. I can understand that, but it could save you from so many situations. Like that's my takeaway from Crane is like, why are we not playing crippling taxes? However, for the rest, if you look for like a solid Crane deck, you can trust that Jinsito has a good eye on this like tower duel style of Crane, so definitely try and go with this one, and it will do you good for the most part. And you could always contact Jinsito for his ideas on the meta and what is required, if you want a more in-depth look, which I can't provide you because the one Crane deck which I built is a Take Up Command deck, which I'm currently playing in the Landfall tournament. So not able to give you any more insight into that. Okay. Now we go into no, this is not top 8, this is still top 16. We go into, I guess, my most surprise include into the top cut, which is Berserker Crab, which I think are actually, what it? No, okay, the other one is Kyuden Hina. Oh, which was of course Simon. Okay, no, but I played one in the Swiss, but I was actually quite surprised to see so many of it. Like I think there were at least like 2 or 3 in the event. Um, but it is actually Castle of the Forgotten, but with Miyako and 3 calling in favors. So of course we have Pachinko's description of the deck here next to it. Um, First things that jump out, it's a crab deck without any holdings. This deck contains 40 Dynasty characters. And there it stops. It doesn't include Rally, as they say, because the deck does contain Raise the Alarm as a 3-off. So because the Rally cards could decrease the consistency in your Dynasty deck for Raise the Alarm, didn't include any. I'm not 100% convinced that's a good enough reason, but yeah. So this deck apparently is just a really aggressive crab deck which tries to throw cards at the opponent. Um, Plays Battle Meditation, which is the spoils of war, but the restriction is you need a Berserker who breaks a province. Common Cause is of course and also including Crab. It's Keeper of Water deck, so it's playing 3 Phytons for the defense. It's playing 2 Seize the Day. Oh, wow, okay. So Seize the Day is the conflict event from the multiplayer box, which makes you first player after the conflict phase begins. Which, given the stronghold, so for those who don't know, for those listening, Castle of the Forgotten is the crab stronghold, which after you break a province, you bow the stronghold, and every conflict for the rest of the turn is a military conflict. So Seize the Day here is a card to ensure you're the first to declare a conflict and activate your box. It's very interesting. I don't know how that plays out. Like overall, like given X amount of games, how impactful this card is. It has some cute implications against something like Cute Coma, where being first player is also very good against that Lion stronghold. And of course, if you are in a say you're both on the opponent's stronghold and you're second player, of course, this card can save you and make you the one with the initiative. So what does this crab deck specifically do? So it plays Raise the Alarm and Guardians of Rokugans and Phyton. So it tries to go fast, defend hard, and then find tempo by either getting something for free of the Raise the Alarm or by playing fight or just by winning high and getting a character of Guardians of Rokugan. It tries to keep the cost overall low. It has one way of the crab because the deck isn't really made to outvalue, it's made to shove characters into the opponent's face. And then I assume Pachinko just said Shosugo Miyako is the biggest tempo card I can find by readying very easily with Disguised and dishonoring something, and calling in favors is my best shot at creating a power disadvantage. Which is an interesting take. I have no clue if I would do something different. I haven't thought about building this deck. As for the province side, it tries to make as much of a fate and tempo advantage. So it has Shinsei's Last Hope to reduce the cost of characters being played from it. A very powerful eminent province for Crab. It has Vassal Fields and appealing to the fortune, so fate drain and then putting a character into play. And then Manicured Garden for more fate. So yeah, it's a Crab deck that says I'm going to try to go hard. So we have Darter in chat saying, I think the moment that sealed my loss to him was when he called in favors my spell scroll onto a steadfast witch hunter. In during a political earth conflict by any chance, or he could go political earth after. Because I don't think. Oh no, there is a like spreading. The deck is playing. Yeah, okay, you could fetch Spreading the Darkness because it is indeed an earth spell. Or an earth card. It doesn't have to be a spell. Yeah. So Spreading the Darkness, it's a card that's been out for a long while, I think from the second cycle, but it's the you pay 2 honor, 0 cost, and you get +4 military, and you can't be targeted by card abilities. But I think that's like the only. Or you could recur a Tetsubo of Blood with it. But yeah, so that's interesting. Yeah, like on the Dynasty side, of course, there's the general crap characters you'd expect. Of course, Crisis Breaker makes his return as a very good keeper role card for crap. We actually see a corrupted card in the Exiled Guardian, which comes in as a 4/3 for 2, which then can sacrifice him to discard a status token on a character or province. Which is, I mean, it's just Crab's Brash Samurai, which costs honor to declare and has a useful ability when it would leave play. Other standout cards, Ooshi, which definitely isn't included in every Crab deck, I think. But if you can declare more military conflicts, hey. I think that's definitely what the Crab deck here wants. We see Yakamo, which of course is a Berserker and who will probably then keep standing for the whole round, except maybe against the Scorpion opponent. So definitely a threat there. One of the Forgotten, which is of course the cheap Berserker. We have the Repentant Legion, the Berserker army, which helps the buys for next turn. But I think this generally. The Repentant Legion does have some cute synergy with Raise the Alarm for the next turn. Oh no, Raise the Alarm can only turn a Dynasty card. Okay. We're even playing Tainted Hero. Wow. Okay, so yeah, a very aggressive in the lines of like Unicorn HMT sort of crab deck, which I think, given the splash, has opportunities for other splashes. depending on what you might want to counter in the meta. But of course, Miyako and the Calling in Favors will be generally good cards. I have no fucking clue how to evaluate this deck for the rest. If it can do its thing, if it breaks a province turn 1 as first player, or in the first round or second round, if it breaks a province in the first conflict, it definitely has some sense of control of the battlefield. Like it will probably won't lose in military to a lot of clans. I can only imagine like how a Scorpion player feels if that box fires every turn. So yeah, it's definitely a bit honor intensive on some of the points. So it might not have a good matchup into Scorpion just because of it might just lose on Dishonor way too easily because it's not playing like it's not playing the honor gaining 1-drop. So it has to win air rings. Yeah. Fast, how to the ground grab deck. Made it. Let me check if I can see. Was it Pachinko playing Crab? I don't know if I will be able to see his name. Simone. Yeah, so this was the Crab Challenger for the event. Which apparently challenged in a 3-3. Okay, interesting. All right. Again, any comments, any questions, feel free to jump in. Here we have my opponent for the top 8, which was HMT Unicorn. Yeah. So how the matchup went, I almost lost turn 2 to Chagatai with 2 Daikyu being played. Unicorn player opened up with Ride at Dawn 2 times, turn 1. Immediately passed, made me discard 2 cards. Got 1 break turn 1. And then came in and aggressive with a bot Chagatai with a Daikyu on it. And what it came down to, it's always going to be, it can depend. Usually with Unicorn, you're either going to try to hold on and run them out of resources and any chance to come back. And then you can go for the Conquest win. Because you usually will have time to come back in Conquest. Or you will dishonor them, depending on your clan. I ended up dishonoring the Unicorn. He didn't have a Spoils of War. I just managed to poke and maybe break like 2 provinces and win an Earth Ring here and there, while he went for water to keep the Chagatai standing. And then 3 breaks were there. He was on box with political left. I saw his hand because they broke upholding authority without being able to ambusher it. I saw I removed Jin from his hand and he only had captive audience. I have dishonorable assault on the stronghold. I dishonor 4 of his characters. I have a huge hand advantage. And even though he had Daikyu and I couldn't really defend with anything, he couldn't put it in military. So yeah, after Dishonorable Assault dishonors his row, he has one political power. And I'm safe for the next turn. And I'm scot-free for the next turn to then start dishonoring him. That was my matchup against Carlos. In general, the Unicorn HMT deck, popular splashes will always be Lion. In this specific instance, we see just 3 strengthened numbers. The row is generally very samey for all the HMT decks: Upholding Authority, Appealing to the Fortunes, Kanzordu, Cycle of Vengeance, and then Golden Plains to delay any counter conquest plans. Because Golden Plains will move it to the 4th province and then you need to break the 4th province first. Like there's nothing like really stand out if you know what the Unicorn HMT deck does. It's playing 3x Noyan with reserved hands. Maybe that's a bit standoutish. I don't know what Unicorn HMT decks will normally do these days. So for the rest, it's all the Unicorn characters you know, which will be in the Unicorn deck. This one chose for Taku Tetsuko because that's generally the card which will get you most leverage when being on the offense, because everything the opponent does costs 1 more until they can't do anything anymore. Defend Your Honor is usual: 3 Cavalry Reserve, 3 Captive Audience. This Unicorn player chose for Fire Roll Keeper with Jin, which is understandable. Jin, of course, a power card. And then 2 Daikyu, the Sabers, Curved Blade, Elegant Essence, Shinjo Ambusher. Like, all very standard. The only thing is the 3 strength numbers. And I don't know if I have any Unicorn players watching here, but I think 3 strength numbers is just... I don't know. It feels too... I'm wondering if there's not like any other card from Lion or in general that you would want to include, even over, like, say you even if you still do like 2 strength numbers. I know Send Home is good. I'm not going to I'm not going to say that, but what if you use your strength? What if you only find your strength in numbers? What if you only find your strength in numbers in during the first turns, and then you end up with only Way of the Open Hand? Oh yeah, like indeed, like 1 makeshift war camp from Lion, which is like a huge power boost. The Of course, it's a Unicorn HMD deck. The deck is always going to be very all in. I'm just not sure if like only 3 strength in numbers is what you want out of this splash. Like, what about maybe you're ready for battle? Is your Conflict and Dynasty side so well equipped that you don't care about bow effects? I actually don't think so. I think there's a lot of like HMT decks who might play like the Shinoman Wayfinders, which goes wide way better than this deck, which could pass like a ready for battle. But this deck is pretty attachment heavy and pretty like it will put a couple of characters into the stronghold deck for sure. But I guess the idea is I have Noyan Like, or I might have Noyan. And yes, indeed, like chat says, you don't have to worry about the watering, so you can go earth, which is, or even fire in some instances, is way more opportune for you than having to be defensive about watering. Um, of course, with events, you open yourself up to cancels like a little bit, but um, in my opinion, this conflict side just feels a bit unoptimized. I'm not sure if I would go either one of the like cavalry reserves or one of the join the fray. I think is probably wrong here. Like those definitely like feel like a 3-2 split or maybe even a 2-2 split. Um, on the dynasty side, I think Noyan is good. You have the reserve tent, so that definitely that definitely does is an argument against like including something like ready for battle to counter bows, but to have those two cards consistently for your push, I think that's a bit hopeful. Um, I think the you can get away with hard buying Tetsuko and LT. Yeah, he also hard bought Chagatai against me with one fate. Or no fate. I don't quite remember. But and yeah, I'm of the opinion, depending on how you build your HMT, like that HMT can still still take it into turn 3 or turn 4 if they don't go all out in one turn, but that's something you've got to identify in some. I'm not saying that this is the case in every matchup. I I do think you can sometimes take it a slight bit slower than go all in and hope everything turns out for the best. But there is some deck building there that needs to happen, and there's some looking into options. I'm not going to say that it is the best option, but I do think there's some playroom there, which some unicorn players too easily discard. But aside from that, I think it's very standard. I just think there's some optimization to be able to be done in the conflict side. I mean, I actually don't think old Altantana is that bad in some cases. Like the extra body is nice, of course, but and it's generally a better card. But old Alti can do some work. But yeah, okay, that was the. Yeah, I understand. I understand, Shadow. I think that was in the top 4 we had another HMT player, so let's quickly have a comparison here of the top 8 versus the top 4 deck, which was Sergio Sanz, which who brought HMT with Cumberluck and a whole different splash. And I think this deck, without looking at it too much, I think this deck exemplifies what I was meant by, even with HMT, you can dial it back, but you will need you're going to build another HMT deck then, what was displayed with Carlos's deck. So Sergio's deck, the province row is mostly the same. We're on Keeper of Air instead of Keeper of Fire, so no Jin. And we play Endless Plains and Frostbitten Crossing. So Endless Plains is of course a scary tempo switch, which your opponent needs to play around if they want to win rings and poke. Which is generally included in most HMT setups. All right, but we even have a card here which I didn't know existed. But okay, so it's also an HMT deck. It's also playing Lion. First things we notice is that this is also on 3 Strength in numbers, but also on 3 Forebearers Echoes, and 1 Makeshift War Camp. It's still on 3 Cavalry Reserves, 3 Join the Fray, 1 Overrun as well. One Way of the Open Hand. And then on the attachment side, we have 1 Commander Tributary, the Makeshift War Camp, Shadow Steed, and actually 2 Talisman of the Sun. So, and the restricted card is Kambalak Benefactor instead of Utaku Tetsuko. So what this deck says is my more expensive conflict cards, which are going to be less expensive because of the Benefactor most likely, is going to just make such efficient, powerful attacks that I don't care about you playing cards. Which is an interesting take. So on the Dynasty side, we see Higashikata Company, which I didn't even know existed. Which is a Unicorn army, 6/3, 2 glory, no attachments, weapon. Except weapon, sorry. Then reaction, after this wins the card, choose another participant character with no fate on it. That character does not bow. Huh. Well, what do you know? Okay. Has to be another character, so can't stand itself, but hey, if you buy this and you charge in the Chagatai or the or the Kaze regular, sorry. I was looking for the other 5 though. It's kind of bonkers. Two of these can keep each other standing. So yeah. It's playing Shiotome. It's playing Shiotome with Okay, we have 3 sabers, which are Gaijin, and 3 curve blades. Okay, in general, I guess it's countable most of the time. Honor itself, maybe it's sometimes awkward. But yeah, no new Altan Saunai, which I think is fine. I think that card is actually not even good in regular HMT, but whatever. Oh, it's better in like the more aggressive style HMTs, but we have some Soul Weavers. All right, so yeah, I think this deck, yeah, it's built to use the Benefactor to make discounts and have a more and have an even bigger push, but probably a push which will come like a bit later depending on how the game plays out. Like a turn or maybe even 2 turns later, but it will get there because of how efficient it is with the cost reductions. And then it uses Minami Kaze Regulus, which is the one if it wins it gains a fate and draws a card, which is more value oriented and keeping the advantage oriented. Which basically, if you join the fray this with a Come-Black Benefactor, it basically paid for the join the fray. Like the card and the fate. So yeah, HMT but with card advantage. And even more powerful effects because it can afford them because of Benefactor. So yeah, that's the difference. I would say on first glance, I think I like this deck more, but of course, Benefactor is an absolutely broken card. Um, so which allows you to do more stupid things. Of course, Tetsuko is also a good, like a really good card. I definitely find it hard to compare the two. I think one definitely leans into the game plan. The earlier HMT deck has more than the Benefactor, but the Benefactor is also like, oh, I'm at least making sure I won't be low on cards to actually play. Um, I I can do more of the stupid shit like join the fray and cavalry reserves. Like the fact that you can play 2 cavalry reserves because they both cost 2 rather than only play 1 cavalry reserves is like a huge deal. Um, so yeah, I would advise this deck if you want to try a Unicorn HMT deck. Um, it now it made it to the top 4. It could have easily been like a 2 top 4 Unicorn when it comes to my performance against the Unicorn. Um, but yeah, HMT man and Unicorn restricted cards, they are good. All right, our Lion Hatamoto and top 8 finisher Enrique, which is probably the Lion you should listen to when it comes to putting cards in the deck, except for me. But we'll get to that later. So we have Keeper of Water, which is logical. Hayake no Shiro with with row containing fertile fields, honors reward, pilgrimage, spectral visitation, and art of war. So fairly standard. Most jump out thing is the honors reward, but if you want like a very safe fire province, honors reward is a pretty good one in line, I guess. We are on Crane Splash with 3 Voice of Honor, 3 Resourcefulness, and a Captivating Story, which is almost the same as what I chose to bring. I think the Captivating Story is fine, although not a really good card, but a political pump for 4 at any point in the late game could be good. We are on 2 Censures instead of 2 Defend Your Honors, even though a keeper. So that's an interesting choice. Only 2 Disarm, no removal in the no attachment removal in the Dynasty side. 3 tactical to sharpen, 1 take up command. That's all very standard. 2 Singer is very standard. Wave Lion, 1 Jackie is offered. Ready for Battle 2 is a consideration. I was only on 1. I think depending on what you expect, 2 could be fine. To prepare for is pretty standard. Only 2 in service to my lord. Given that you're also playing Yomi and Motso and Sanuya as well, I actually think I disagree with only 2 in service to my lord. But some of that can be offset with Hayaka no Shiro. But yeah, only 2 disarm, so very, very risky in my opinion. Actually leaning towards the cancel side more than the attachment removal side, which is, and I think I was already underprepared with 3 pieces of conflict attachment removal. Playing 1 Ancestral Armory, which is cute because a weapon can return the Tessin. I don't hate it. It's fine. 2 Honored Veterans over 3 Tsanui. I personally like Honored Veterans way more because it's way more of a power card. Of course, Tsanui with Hayaka no Shiro is all great and dandy. Of course, I'm not going to say like 3 Tsanui is a mistake, but given the fact that you're playing Votes of Honor, I would generally like 2 Honored Veterans more, but I recognize that Enrique went 3 Resourcefulness and 3 card games, which is a bit different from mine. So it's probably not wrong. We have some gifted tacticians. I play Fearless Skirmisher as well because of the cute synergy with Resourcefulness. I disagree on making this a 3 of. Hell. Yeah. I think there's some more better includes you can do. Some more tech things like a Nujaki or something. Like honestly, really, if you're playing, yeah, if you're playing Sancho and you expect Sancho to be online, I don't see why you wouldn't play like one new Jerky. But you, I think Enrique has done better to build around Hayek and Shira than most Hayek and Shira players by including some more 2-drops, like the Fearless Skirmisher and the Battle Aspirant. Um, Playing Lion Sprite Paragon, that's fine. You at least have the splash to play Lion Sprite Paragon. It's also the reason why the 2 ready for battles are here. If you buy this card, you can't really afford like being bowed as well. So yeah, I think Enrique did a pretty good job to work more with Hayek and Ashura than some people do. As you see, there's no Spirit Callers, there are no Lion Sprite Brawlers in this deck. I think generally you will see those cards less in Lion, and I think that is correct for some amount of copies. I think for the deck that he went with, I think that is also correct to completely cut at least the Spirit Callers. I don't know if it's correct to completely cut out the Brawlers. But maybe it's more correct to cut the Brawlers than like maybe 1 or 2 Spirit Callers. But I'd have to say it, but I think that's fine. Of course, this is a Conquest-only Lion deck. I think that should have a weakness, but maybe just the fact of Tsanuri or Paragon can carry them through so many games. I wasn't able to ask Enrique about his opinion on that. He qualified with 5-1, whereas I challenged him with 4-2. In general, this deck feels less weird than what I did. So if you want a really solid baseline Conquest only Lion deck, look towards this version and it will carry you through a lot. I think there's no major faults here. I think there might be some optimization between, do I play Sancho or defend your honor? Do I really want 1 captivating story and 3 resourcefulness over something like an above question, which I did? But that's of course my personal choice, with reasoning, which I will come to when we go over my deck. Things like the Honored Veterans and the Tsanuri copies. The Tsanuri is probably correct as a 3x over the 2x Honored Veterans given the amount of honor in the conflict, but I'm not quite sure if I agree to the amount of honor in the conflict. Aside from that, 3 Mastermind is good because we have Centauro. That's the main reason. Else I would maybe cut down to 2, maybe. I don't think 3 further, like Fearless Skirmisher definitely feels like the most cuttable thing in here, but given HNS sometimes just finds no value in turns, I think having like more 2-drops and then being at least a sort of flexible 2-drop in that it can move around Dishonor tokens if you need to, I think is fine. 1 champion of Yomi is also probably pretty good. It's definitely a consideration whether you want to do this or not. I didn't. Honestly, I wish I... No, we'll get to it later. Yeah, that's it. So, really solid Lion Conquest deck. If you know Enrique, he did a lot of Lion building in End of Imperial and now, and he definitely knows the way around him, so you can count on this being a pretty solid deck. All right. Okay. Onwards to our somewhat nerfed, or I guess pretty nerfed, Phoenix Splash Crab deck with Kyuden Hida. So usually what this deck would do was, together with Yasuki Broker and stuff like the Become Sky, which we still see, and the Spell Scroll, have like a really like a super like no not efficient like bonkers card and fate advantage on top of a really good like on top of a good control card which you can recur with Spell Scroll in Earth Becomes Sky. Now what Simona did, he was using one of Cleanse the Empire, and as I found out in Swiss, and as he managed to recount many a times, this card did him good in a lot of games, even as a 1x. So Cleanse the Empire, after you win the conflict, as the attacking player, remove one fate from each character your opponent controls. And then if there's one with no fate, bow it. So even though I was playing around Way of the Crab with my one-off inclusion of Stand Your Ground, I used that in that game. Even was it through draws or just because of this one turn, I ended up losing to Simona in Swiss, partially because of this card. So yeah, in general, this crab deck, it's going to be a conquest deck. It plays all the good crab cards. It has Pathfinder's Blade. It chose Watch Commander as a restricted card. Plays 2 of Tadaka. Plays the Engineer for all the good holdings. It plays like the probably now premier Phoenix Splash. And with Premier, I mean, I think Phoenix Splash is one of the very good choices. I don't think it's necessarily the best choice, but Tadaka version 2 might disagree with me there. Pathfinder's Blade is obviously very good. Any jump out includes for the rest. No, not necessarily so. Dynasty side is pretty standard for this deck. It has a couple of the Urchigenjas which you might not include otherwise, but like the Cuny Purifier, but which are still standard good cards. Yeah, Student of Anatomies, a really good card. It's the premier card why Crab on top of Way of the Crab has such a good matchup into Mitsu Dragon. Final, just a good card to permanently damage opponent's characters. And then the whole my characters stay on the board, sweet, Iron Mine, and Funeral Pyre for value. Carry Forges to fetch things. Couple of Censures. Pious Guardian for negating Dishonor and victory conditions. And then a control-y sort of row with Weight of Duty and Coach's Greeting, and Fertile Fields for card advantage, and Vessel Fields for fate advantage. And Cuny Wastelands on a box for controlling opponent's character's abilities. So yeah, I mean, this deck is definitely beatable in a lot of ways. I think Crab is a whole lot more fair without a broker and such. I think this splash is a very good splash. I think Cleanse the Empire is a wonderful power card to include. I think Simone did a good job in piloting this deck. If you are looking for a solid, like Kyuden Hida style Conquest Crab deck with some control elements, definitely look towards this. I think this is a very solid version. Maybe the only... No, okay. Yeah. The only thing to say is what about to disarm? I think that plays into having Way of the Crab as an option, because things with attachments on them, usually you'll be able to deal with Way of the Crab in some sort of way from time to time. So maybe you can cut back and play 2 Disarm. There is 2 Disciple of Shinsei. Again, I do not know why people play Shinsei over Mia Mystic. Especially because your Mia Mystic works with... Well, okay, no, you don't have Spell Scroll anymore, but it used to work with Spell Scroll, both for Censure and an Earth Spell. I don't know why with that change you would include Shinsei. Like, it would have to be the mentality of the opponent, like, okay, I'm still going to get value out of my attachment, so I play it the turn you place in Shinsei, over the fact that, oh, I play Mia Mystic, so I deny the opponent's attachment this turn, so he won't play it. I think that's an interesting talk to have. I think not having the option... I guess you can sacrifice it in Crab, of course. That's the thing I'm overlooking. You have a 2/2 body which you can sacrifice. In Crab, this makes sense. In Crab, this makes sense. In other clans, it might not make as much sense over Mia Mystic. Now I got it. Sorry about it, everyone. But yeah, alright. Tadaka Crab. Still good. Try it. This is the second High House of Light. We're going to wait with this one. Okay. Now. Me. I made it to top 4. I am honestly unsure if I was supposed to. But I can and I will validate almost all but one choice in this deck. For the listeners, we are currently looking at a list which is a bit longer than most other people's lists scroll down to, because there's a bunch of one-offs. Now, let's just lay out the fundamentals of the deck. It is Keeper of Water as well, because usually Lions would like to play Renowned Singer. There's other choices which I don't think, which you could make cases for, but Lion will most likely always be Keeper of Water. Oh, Water role might be Seeker. The provinces: Dishonorable Assault, Art of War, Manicured Garden, Upholding Authority, so now Spectral Visitation, and Weight of Duty. And then the overall layout of the deck, it is a Conquest deck, but I want the option to have an alternate honor win condition if need be. How do I facilitate that? Mostly Hall of Victories. So there is a sort of pseudo honor victory condition who comes into play in very specific matchups. Sometimes Hall of Victories make my Dishonor victory conditions in some matchups a bit worse. Mainly the Scorpion, like Kyuden Bayushi style decks, and like Unicorn, for example. But It is there because it is needed in some matchups. Now, for those who are able to look at the list, there are a lot of one-offs. Some of these one-offs bundle into specific things, like attachment removal. Like there's one hand-to-hand you'll see there, but there's two disarm. You can, in most circumstances, just see the hand-to-hand as a third disarm. And for most of the one-offs, this is the case in the conflict side. They are not like totally disconnected one-offs, which make no sense. Some of them are a little bit more on themselves than others, but usually they provide a function which the other cards do in a way the other cards can't. We'll go into that a little bit. So, I think one of the obvious comparisons to that is hand-to-hand and disarm. Now, disarm is way more flexible because it's not limited to a conflict. It is not limited to one conflict type. It is not limited to participation of some kind. But it costs 1. Now, if I was on Courtyard, which would have been my preferred restricted card were it not banned, something like hand-to-hand can give you a lot of efficiency over something like a disarm. And it can still do that without Courtyard, here as a one-off. But there's some restrictions to it why I don't want it like as a 3-off and just remove the disarms, for example. In a lot of matchups, especially like Mitsu, who just can play a lot of its attachments into military conflict, I can just use this to pinpoint, remove the attachment, and it will just have been a 0-cost disarm. It can't always be that, so that's why it's not a 3-off. That's why I'm not running 3 hand-to-hand over 3 over and 0 disarm, but that's why the card is here. Of course, what I did with this deck is do understand it is not fully optimal, because what I did with this deck is I took what I had from the first online tournament for Emerald Legacy and I switched out my restricted card Courtyard for 3 Imperial Storehouse. Yes, for those listening, my restricted card as Lion was Storehouse. And for the most part, I will stand with that choice as being the best restricted card for my deck. Outside of some interesting choices which I haven't tried. But maybe more on that later. One of the one-offs you'll see is 1 chord games, because I'm playing 3 honored veterans and I'm playing 2 resourcefulnesses. And I'm also playing a card which groups into that, which is prove your skill a bit. I wanted some more flexibility in my conflict side, so I only included 1 chord games. Prove your skill, which if you don't know, 0 cost, only play if you're more honorable, discard a status token on any character. This is flexibility. Do I want to more easily remove a honor token of my opponent, so my Voice of Honor is online? Sorry, by the way, my splash is Crane, 3 Voice of Honor, 2 Resourcefulness, 1 above question. Do I want to turn my Voice of Honor online more easily, which chord games is way more restrictive in? Do I want to discard the Dishonor token from a Sorcerer Sadako to depower her? Do I want to discard a Dishonor token from my characters over waiting for court games outside of a conflict, for example. This is why Prove Your Skill is here. It is a court games in some scenarios where a court games just can't be played. That's why the Prove Your Skill is here. It's been a very useful card. It has done good for me. Sometimes it sits in your hand, but Lion has the privilege of having Sharpen the Mind, which makes those sort of things less to worry about, because you can always discard a useless card for the matchup for +3/+3 in one conflict. 3 in Service to My Lord, 2 Prepare for War, which is also an honor card, which is why I also don't want a court games, like a second or third court games. 1 Ready for Battle, because 1 Ready for Battle is always fine. Sometimes you just want a reactive ready on a non-unique character, because you're in Service to My Lord is somewhat restricted in turns where you don't find Center, or you're not buying Taturi, or you're not buying Tsuko. So I'm ready for that. Now, 1 Reconnaissance. The biggest thing you need to know about this card is the tactic. And it's probably the worst card in the deck, and it's probably the card which you can easily just cut and put in like 1 extra Uchihaki's Offer, or 1 extra Prove Your Skill even. But what it allows to do in this deck is just sometimes in Swiss, or even in the top cut where you know the deck list, go and see what's in this province, what's in this province, what's in this province in a row. Can help you organize your attacks. And with the kicker, if you have 5 or more honor, which my deck can pretty easily achieve over most decks, it lets you discard any card in those provinces you chose. So it can be a Season of War if you need it to be for the opponent's side. So it can be Dynasty discard for the opponent's side as well. So it's a tactic. Why do we have tactics? Because we are playing Akadon Mastermind, which lets you remove tactics from the game, from your conflict discard to bow someone, depending on their glory. So if you always need to remove 1 from the game, even if the opponent has 0 glory, but if they have 3 glory, you need to remove 3, for example. And because we play... Where is he? Because we play Field Tactician. Field Tactician is another one of the Under Full Length Shadow cards for Lion. It says when after you play Tactic card, its reaction, choose a card in any player's conflict discard pile, place it into that player's conflict deck 3rd from the top. Now, in very specific scenarios, this can break your opponent's hand in like a 1-bit scenario. And the control player in me would kind of want this card to be like something which can remove cards from graveyards, but 3rd from the top is too close in like a 5-bit scenario to perform that sort of function, to be a tech card against the opponent's conflict discard. Now what this card is... Sorry. What this card is mostly useful for is putting 1 of your tech cards for a matchup back on top of your deck. Do you need a disarm next turn? Because you're playing like a dragon opponent with a lot of attachments, which you need to remove. Yeah, you have a consistency in your disarms. Do you want another even the odds? Because you're going to be playing Unicorn. Oh, put another even the odds. This is my pseudo replacement for Courtyard. And it's a commander, so it can hold Tactical Ingenuity. It can be Prepare for War and be a 2-cost 4/3. And it reacts to playing Prepare for. Against Scorpion, you can put another Prepare for on top of your deck to counteract Dishonor tokens. So yeah. Back to the reconnaissance. You can cut this card, put in another tactic, put in any like of the one-offs extra, depending on the meta you expect. You can still use reconnaissance. I don't think it's the worst thing ever, but its use is limited. I play one Stand Your Ground. This is my tag against Crab, because they can't really dishonor my characters very easily. This can let me eat Way of the Crab for free. Like almost for free. Of course, it cost me a card and honor token, but it not having to play around Way of the Crab in such an annoying manner as having to make sure you have fated characters is a godsend sometimes. So that's why they want to stand your ground. And of course, in normal games where your characters aren't dishonored, this can save a character which has no fate on it, but is still honored. So stand your ground is, I think, in every Lion deck a decent one-off. Feel free to use this as a Lion player playing any sort of splash. Of course, resourcefulness and a good honoring conflict side will help you make that card more useful. Like if you're playing like say a dragon splash for some reason and you don't have enough core games or you don't have enough prepare for or not enough commanders to use a prepare for, then maybe you don't want to put in a stand your ground. But I see Crab as an opponent to take into account, so I include a stand your ground. Then one, Ujaki's Offer. This could be a 2x. It's also a tactic. It's a great card. It's a more of an aggressive card, like for the final push. Use it to get something nasty out of the conflict. Not playing this card on a Mitsu, which I know is going to be hard tattooed in, lost me a game against one of the High House of Light decks that qualified, which would put me at 3-0 in the Swiss. But yeah, it's a great card. But of course, it's not in a fate worse than that. You need a character of the same cost or higher in a conflict, and it puts a fate on them, so it allows for a bit more longevity on the opponent's side. But it does what you want to do: get something nasty out of the conflict. Then the rest, one above question, really good in dragon matchups if you can protect against let go. It's really good against Lion. They can't wear the Lion, they can prepare for war, they can't in service to my lord. This card can win you matches against Lion. Play 10,000 battles. Why not include a value card recursion engine when you are playing Hall of Victories? This card can be slotted in most other Lion decks which don't include Hall of Victories, but it becomes a little bit more awkward. Of course, I'm not saying that Hall of Victories never put my opponent at like slightly above my honor, but most of the time it's workable, right? This Hall of Victories plan, I recognize its merit. I know how I play around it. Be careful with it if you're a bit of an inexperienced player, because you need to know, okay, I need to defend this, or I need to take it more slowly, or now I need to go for the honor game plan. But that aside. Then one fine katana, two honored fans, just standard includes index. Maybe like a bit on the lower side, but a one fine katana. But we have sharpened the mind as a 3x. Then 3x tactical ingenuity. I actually would go back to 2x. I threw in a third one because I went into the field tactician. I saw, I have 12 commanders. I can easily run 3, but I actually regret it. There were like too many games. There were too many games where tactical ingenuity was stranded in my hand. Even with 12 commanders. Like, let me count them to be sure. 2, 5, 8. 11. Okay, 11s. It's because not all Lion commanders are actually good characters. And then to round up the conflict side, 2 Stinger and 1 Spirit Car Apology. 1 Spirit Car Apology because it's such a flexible card when you have a Dynasty side with a few impactful 3 drops. I removed one of those 3 drops, which was the Lion Magistrate. Because building my Dynasty side was difficult. Now, on the Dynasty side, 3 Mastermind, because Mastermind is a great card. It's the commander that bows someone with the tactics. 3 Totori, because Totori is the best Lion 5 drop. Mainly because it's unique and your only fucking stand cares about uniques, so you're not going to play Master Tactician. For someone who wants to include Master Tactician in this deck, don't, because you're going to be building a whole lot other conflict side. This deck has, with Dishonorable Assault being a battlefield, has 3 battlefields. So, no Master Tactician in this deck. 3 Centaur, which is standard 3 Levy, which is standard 2 Fearless Skirmisher, as I said. It has some cute interaction with resourcefulness. I'm playing cute in Ikoma, so I can't make use of HNS. So for me, the Fearless Skirmishers were 2x, and I think even 2x is sometimes difficult, but I don't hate the card. 3x Field Tactician, Commander, all the synergy, the recursion synergy from the touch from the top of the deck. 3 Prodigy, good political poke, helps the honor sub victory condition. 1 Ujiaki, because 1 Ujiaki for it's a power card. Like, oh, I have the favor, oh, I can buy an Ujiaki and bring in a bunch of other stuff. I can Spirit Call it. 1 Spirit Caller, because Spirit Caller is not a good. How do I say this? The fleetingness of Lion who uses Spirit Caller is not the optimal way to play Lion right now. Spirit Caller is very helpful in teching something into a conflict, like say the Lion Magistrate, like say Matsu Koso, which I'm playing, let's say your Ujiaki. But this card sucks on the early turns. I am not playing Spectral Visitation because I think Upholding Authority for Lion is at least 5 times better than Spectral Visitation. The 5 times is arbitrary, it's just a better include for Lion. I don't care about a tempo play in 1 turn. I want to see my fucking opponent's hand and remove cards from it so I know what cards I need to play around. Fuck Spectral Visitation, Upholding Authority is better. And doesn't get randomly fucked by Diplomat, although, of course, it's still scouted. Two Brawler, mainly because I'm not able to put like investments into Brawler. Like it depends on the matchup. It's definitely still a very good card in some matchups where there's also like not very towery decks. Like against the Scorpion player, it's still very good. Although Kyuden Bayushi offsets it a lot. Against Crab, it's still pretty good because it can at least like remove some of the low power bodies, but you just don't invest into this character. It sucks if you're a second player most of the time. I don't have the build to put attachments onto it to make it more easily activatable. Sure, I can wave a lion, but hey, then I don't have my 3 Way of the Lions to magically win the final conflict on Stronghold, and we can't have that, can we? So, only 2 Brawler. They still have synergy with Zentaro. It's still a good baseline card to go with a Water Ring and deny your opponent's bow with Cutie Coma. But you saw Enrique cut it from HNS. I think that's completely valid. Enrique also cut the Spirit Calls from HNS. I think that's also completely valid options. These are not the cards you're going to win games with. The Brawler, more than the Spirit, you're going to win more games with Brawler than with Spirit Caller, but it depends on the deck. 3 Berzerkers, still the most efficient 1-drop for Lion. Matsukosa, which is attack against Dragon, against Crane, against Lion. It's a flex card. You might cut this in some metas. You might not include it if you really don't want to. You can include the Lion Magistrate in some scenarios. Although Lion's Magistrate isn't defensive and Matsukoso can very much be defensive. For those who don't know, it's the Lion character, the 3-drop Berserker with 3 dash and 2 glory. Which can activate and gives everyone minus military equal to their printed political skill. So it takes away 5 military power from Mitsu, which, because Mitsu 2 in a lot of decks needs to rely on the honor token or the limited in use hurricane punches or acolytes, which I can just disarm. This just immediately puts Mitsu at like base 0 power, or if honored base 2. And against Crane it just takes a lot of base power away against, right, that kind of thing. It's a great deck card to use with a Prodigy or with a regular Spirit Caller. Then to Tsuko. Tsuko is a worse character than Toturi in its effect, but its effect is sometimes useful, and it's a commander, so that gives it some upside over Toturi. So as a high coster, as a 2x, Tsuko is definitely worth it. And then 2x Obstinate Recruit, because 0 drops are good. And I'm playing a sub-honor victory condition, so I'm able to keep Obstinate Recruit. Some people will low bid into you to remove this from play. Then you laugh because they drew less cards, and you win because you have better and more cards in hand. Ha ha ha. And otherwise it's 0 cost 2-0. 2 Season of War, 3 Honored Veterans. And then 3 Storehouses for card draw, because Lion sucks at card draw. And then 2 Staging Ground. Now, like I said, there's some flexibility in the conflict side, there's some flexibility in the dynasty side, according to what you want. When taking into account the flexibility, take in mind, are you taking like commanders away from the deck? Is it a 3-drop which you're adding? Like the Lion Magistrate, for example. Right. Now, from my experiences from the Kotei, Kyuden Ikoma wasn't useful enough. And I know, I just, and to the point which I would actually consider another stronghold. And I know I just shocked my 5 viewers. But so I've been playing Kyuden Ikoma for a long time now, having to be like from when it came out, having someone convince me to play this. But I've played it for the whole time. And trust me when I say that this wasn't a scenario of, well, they just didn't block, because if they would block, they would lose their board. No. I'm also not going to downplay the power level of Kyuden Ikoma. But there were just too many matchups where it was like either Mitsu Dragon, who had an Iron Foundation stance on it, or Scorpion, which could just attack and then defend and then KB, or Unicorn, who just doesn't defend. And I'm like sitting there with my fucking Kyuden Ikoma thinking, oh, in this scenario I would actually rather have stood my 2-drop, or I would have actually preferred Yoji no Shiro as a fucking push for the stronghold, or just to say, oh, military, I'm winning without expending a Way of a Lion, on my brawler or without having to expend a card. There were enough times which I thought, fuck, Tuning Coma is doing nothing. And that was one of the things I noticed. Now, still a very good card. It's still going to do your job when you need to slow down the game. But what I noticed, I wanted to win conflicts, and I didn't need to slow down the game. Was my problem. Even if I wanted to switch to the honor victory condition, slowing down the game wasn't needed, because most of the time I was tempo, because I have Voice of Honor, because I have generally characters with better stats. But this is something I'm going to try. I'm baseline, I'd say just play this deck with Kutni Koma. No matter how much you change it, it's still, for now, it's still the stronghold I would play with. But in my head, I had something like, I could use a different stronghold for this kind of deck. It would probably have to be a new stronghold. Maybe it could be Hayake no Shiro. Maybe it could be Yoji no Shiro. God forbid. But it's potential. Something from the province row, I would cut Weight of Duty for something else. I wouldn't know what Void Province, but it did nothing. It wasn't useful enough. I only activated it against my top 4 opponent, Gunnar. It's too unwieldy to use with the levies because they can't defend in political, and the obstinate recruit is not present enough, and I use my low cost characters to poke in too many matchups, so they're not ready to defend. And I don't have like a low cost unique. I am not sure what Void Province I would put. Maybe potentially Pilgrimage. That has some implications in Mitsu matchups. But I would remove Weight of Duty. I would look to something else. And then the one I'm not sure of is Art of War. The cards definitely were nice from time to time, but sometimes I felt like my row, Dishonorable Assault would be in every matchup. It's a stronghold province, by the way. I'll get to it in a second. But the Art of War, sometimes I just wanted a defensive water province, I think, like give me a Midnight Revels, or I guess it would have to be Midnight Revels. I'm thinking of other water provinces, but nothing immediately comes to mind. Maybe like, it's like Smuggling Cove, is that Seeker or Water? It's Seeker, right? God damn it, now it's giving me everything with COVID. Smuggler's Cove, so yeah, that's Seeker. Okay, can't immediately play it in this deck. Okay. No. Oh shit, no, I closed it, right? Fuck. So yeah. Art of War, you could potentially include like a defensive province like a Midnight Revels. Then Dishonorable Assault. This province saves lives. Why? Dishonor victory condition against Scorpion and Unicorn. Against Scorpion, I think everyone knows Vice Proprietor. This card dishonors Vice Proprietor, which it can't use its ability on your stronghold attack. It dishonors Kachiko, which makes it a lot tougher to use in the conflict. Against, usually in the days I would be on Scorpion Splash, I would play this with For Shame. It can activate For Shame if you want to include that in your deck. That's a very valid include. It perfectly works with For Shame. It turns on your Voice of Honor. Against Crane, it can remove a shit ton of power if they swing out and turn off their Voice of Honor. Um, Against Crab, it's Dishonor victory condition. Like this, it's a battlefield if you want to play a Master Tactician in some decks. Like, this is a good province. Play this province. Alright. It's yeah, it saved me so many times. But yeah, alright. Okay, that was me rambling on my deck. It's very income like it's weird, right? I'm not playing the Lion power cards. I'm not playing a Tannery. I'm not playing a Lion's Paragon. Why? Because I don't think I need Sanori. I'm obviously not playing HNS, so it's a little bit inefficient for me to play Sanori. I see some weaknesses in Paragon, which I don't want to play into. I don't want to redo my conflict side to make sure Paragon doesn't like just lose me 3 fate. Although I do see the power of the card, I do see how sometimes other clans can deal with it, and then you had a fucking 6-4 in 4 conflicts and 3 standing glory for fate. So I'm not going to downplay Paragon, but I see some weaknesses and I see some deck building restrictions on my end, which I don't want. I'm playing fucking Imperial Storehouse. This is the correct thing. There's some interesting side options. Keepers. Although I'm not playing something like Spectral Visitation. I am playing Station Ground, so I have some filtering. But I'm also not playing like back in the olden days, like Miya Satoshi or something. So you could look into Keepers. It's synergy with the Service to My Lord. I'm going to build a Lion deck with Keepers, but that's for another time. I think like Contested Countryside could be interesting. I haven't looked into Contested and whether that would be a good include in the meta. Like, it's always like rather solid on its own, but hey, it's something you tend to forget because you have some good incline cards, right? So yeah, that are like things you can think of when you look at this deck, and you might want to like do some of your own stuff with it. But yeah, in general, this plays like a Lion deck. You get a low coster, you try to get a Yal, like a unique character or something that turns into Centaur, and you go Conquest. Alright, enough of my deck. That was a dragon deck. We'll get to the dragon when we get to Gunnar. Okay, our runner-up. And I think probably the least expected deck in Zaragoza, which was Dishonor Phoenix with Shirogisu and Keeper of Air. I was on one hand mostly so very happy to see like something like this. I did manage to play against it. I lost against Gunnar in top 4. Mitsuton won 3 key alignments. Was still a pretty interesting game. It's on stream if you want to watch it. But okay. But this deck, I didn't manage to play against it, but it looked so like I'm so happy to have seen this sort of thing. So how does this work? Basically, you dishonor because you have a few dishonor options and you bid 1. That's how most dishonor things work, but people tend to forget that drawing cards is pretty good. And the Forgotten Library, on top of something like the Mediator of Hostilities, is a lot of card draw. Like potentially like 1 to 4 extra card draw, depending on how many libraries. I mean, if you have like 1 or 2 mediators. Yeah, this is just a bid 1 deck. Like, maybe if you don't find a mediator or a Forgotten Library, you might not bid 1, but your stronghold draws usually the Forgotten Library. Like, shit, I can't have courtyard, but Phoenix can draw 5 cards a turn, whatever. In any case, um, and then take away my cards with it's actually not playing Tadaka, which is like wow. Even though it's playing Prodigy of the Waves, like I don't really understand that. I think this deck could very easily slot in one conflict Tadaka. And I think it's a mistake it doesn't, but aside from that. Um, so what does it use? It uses like Asako Diplomat, which is like a core card. I mean a core as in core set card, which is like the Kotei, if it wins a conflict, it dishonors a character. Or honors a character. It uses Acolyte of Koyane, which is I think one of the lesser bought things probably, which can give pride in a political conflict to a participating character. So that's a potential source of dishonor. Plays Garanto Guardian, which is a very good defensive character. It resolves uh, the element of the province if it wins on defense. There's the Inquisitorial Initiate, which is interesting. If it wins a conflict, you get to see X cards, where X is the amount of cards with no fate, and then you discard one of those cards from the opponent's hand. So, more Tadaka-esque sort of ability. 1-drop, 0-2. Needs to win a conflict, but. And then it uses Meddling Mediators, which is like if declare 2 events, 2 conflicts, sorry. It uses Naive Student as draw. It uses Righteous Delegate, which I haven't seen outside of my local Phoenix player who plays this card. It's the one where during a conflict where the characters participating non-bushy characters get +1, military and political, and bushy characters get -1, which I don't. I'm not sure if I agree with this as like a 3x because you're not specifically a very wide, like a wide deck, and it's not like the meta is all bushy. So yeah, I mean it can be overlaid with Miyako, but you have enough targets for that. So I'm not sure as this is a 3x, it's a cute include. I could see it definitely as like one of those flexible slots, like as a 2x or maybe a 1x. Yeah, I like even the Phoenix Dynasty event is probably better like as slot in over 2 of these or 1 of these. The Dynasty event is rally as well. Okay, but like that's the Dynasty side. It has like the low drops, the defensive drops, and like the Solemn Scholar, the Garanto Guardian, and then it tries to pass and I think commit to defense, and by defending, win and dishonor you either through their characters or the effects that the characters have, which give you pride or dishonor you. And then on the conflict side, it helps to facilitate that with magistrate intervention, which require Kotei or magistrate. And then it dishonors, and if you attack twice, it double dishonors. It has 1 spy set core, which is cute. Trick of Light is good for Mitsu matchup. It is also just a general flexible card in some matchups. This can save you against Mitsu, and not finding it is what lost him the game against Gunnar in the finals. So Final Whisper is Dishonor token here, okay, Dishonor token there. Elemental Inversion is a very flexible card, which of course can give you airing, can deny airing, can give you Void Ring in some situations if you would need Void, can make you go Earth again if you manage to attack. Then of course backhand complement because it's a Dishonor deck. And then yeah, it's a deck that tries to defend, draw cards from defending from like the mediator if it has the mediator in play, and get card advantage from Forgotten Library and the Stronghold, and then choke you out of cards. It's province lineup with Before the Throne, Kuroi Mori, Rally to the Cause, and Upholding Authority is card advantage based in the Upholding Authority, and then very defensive based in the Rally to the Cause, the Kuroi Mori. And then Before the Throne is pure Dishonor, so tries to deny the Dishonor game plan, tries to deny the Conquest game plan, or get 2 honor off of you out of it. And then the Phoenix player puts abandoning honor on the Stronghold. This is an alt trick. If you have a dishonored character and the Phoenix can put you at 1 honor in that conflict, the interrupt of abandoning honor will trigger first. If you have a dishonored character, it will discard the dishonored character and lose you your final honor before you actually win the game, and then thus the Phoenix player will win the game. It's an old trick. I'm not sure if it's worth it, but in a Dishonor deck, it might just always be the final Dishonor you need. So this is something you'd have to try out and evaluate over a lot of games. Since 3D Cube put it in, I can assume, and since he made second player, I can assume that he either didn't need it or it worked for him. But yeah, I think there's some optimization to do here on the conflict side and on the dynasty side. But I mean, it's a cool deck. It's a solid deck. Put in a Taraka, I would say. Be careful about what you take out. And get into the mindset of the game, which is a defensive deck, which outgrinds the opponent's resources. Cards are good, y'all. All right. And then the final of the event, it is our winner, Gunnar. With High House of Light, and then we have our other House of Light decks. So, most people know how this works. I will get them next to each other. I will highlight their differences. What do I think? What do I know happened in terms of matchups? What do I think personally is the best way to go? And what do I think about the deck in general? Although I think I already mentioned it at the start of the video. So, we have our top 8. Sorry, we have our top 16, we have our top 8 player, and our top, like our finalist and champion. Good on. So, Louis Size, which I played, which was my other loss in the Swiss. Which, if I played correctly, I could have won, but it is what it is. He chose to go with Crab Splash, Seeker of Fire, and in that chose Feast of Famine, Pathfinder's Blade, yes, Feast of Famine and Pathfinder's Blade as the standout cards. Gonna take a quick look at the other. Oh, this one is going to be interesting. Yeah, only 3 out of 7 influence used for the Pathfinder's Blade. Now, he's not playing Meet a Master as like a backup plan. This was a... Oh, I found Mitsu turn 1. I think 3 dragons I played Alpha me to turn 1 against me. So aside from that, onto the deck itself, it has a fairly standard dynasty. Tadakatsu is an interesting include as an option. I'm not sure if it's needed. It could deny some rings. Worth looking into. Not going to waste too much time on this one. As for the Feast of Famine, I think that is a unneeded luxury. I don't think it adds a lot to the deck. I think it's a very high rolly, oh, I found Mitsu, and then they didn't scout and needed to break Feast of Famine and put more fate on Mitsu, who was probably not going to lose his fate and leave the board. This is as much as I think there are options to get that final fate of Mitsu and remove Mitsu, I think this is a way too unreliable option to counteract that. I do not think Feast of Famine. Yeah, I do not think Feast of Famine is a reason to choose Seeker of Fire. I think this is pretty unimportant, pretty high rolly. Like someone mentioned in chat, it puts Dragon on 3 break provinces that introduces some vulnerabilities here and there. You don't have like a good defensive province. The best you have is fertile, like fertile fields, which doesn't really help you defend anyway. And I think, for example, the Mitsu deck is raceable. Like you can beat it on Conquest earlier, then it could potentially come online. Now on the conflict side, being Seeker role does like removes Defend Your Honor as an option. I think all dragons were on Seeker, so no Defend Your Honor. Centipede 2 is a good choice. I think 3 Believe in a Little Teacher is bad. Think you can say 1, but you'll see later. I think some people, or more specifically Gunnar, made a better choice for like a playable card. I think the Pathfinder's Blade is an interesting choice. I will say Gunnar didn't run into my upholding, I think, in our match. And like not running into upholding with like the Mitsu 2 deck is pretty important. So I don't hate the Pathfinder's Blade choice. But what this all comes down to for Lewis's deck, I think their deck is too I think their deck is too self-centered on their game plan and can be disrupted in way too many ways, which could be killer. I think Lewis was the... Okay, Lewis fully qualified. Except with the modified loss against Gunnar. So I think definitely the Pathfinder's Blade will have helped, but I feel this deck is way more beatable than Gunnar. Pathfinder's Blade is seriously helpful, but it it misses a lot of interaction in some, like it misses a little bit of extra interaction in places. So, which makes me less of a fan of it. But the Pathfinder blade definitely is useful in some situations, though. Okay, our top 8 dragon. Other one was top 16. Seeker of Fire, same thing. The Feast of Famine runs. Pilgrimage of a Pursuit of Justice and Sacred Sanctuary is the restricted card of a key alignment. Whew. Okay, this is a bit of a different deck. Um, this is interesting. Um, this doesn't go. It's playing Mirror Mitchell's Fury as well. And a Wildfire Kick, which is cute. But not a bad include. Can definitely help you in some situations. 2 belief is better than 3 belief. 1 tattoo, centipede tattoo is fine, I think. Cloud is interesting. Dragon tattoo is interesting choice. It's like combining Mitsu 1 and Mitsu 2 in some events. 2 katana, 1 hawk tattoo is... 1 vine tattoo is interesting. I think vine tattoo is a bit of an underrated card, but... no, cute include. Way of the Dragon. And then 3 swell and his splash is 2 clarity of purpose, which is fucking wild. On the dynasty side, we also see nothing terribly out of the ordinary. 1 Kazoe, which I think is better than 2 Kazoe. I think Kazoe does almost nothing in this deck and shouldn't be in the deck. A Seeker Initiate. Holy shit. Antonio woke up and said, I'm going to make a Mitsu deck of my own. And he chose Violence and he put Seeker Initiate in his deck. That's making a statement. Like, I don't have enough card draw, let me put a Seeker Initiate in my deck. With Firewall. Interesting. For the record, I don't think I agree with that choice, but I think Dragon has some flexibility because the other characters don't matter that hugely. Well, Mantra of Fire is spicy, but I don't know why you would choose Fire. I would pick Void. Not that it gets a whole lot of value with only 1 Way of the Dragon. But you have Acolytes and Wanderers and... again, like the Mantra of Fire, just like the Feast of Famine, feels like a very unreliable way to save Mitsu when he would leave. Yeah, that he's playing 3 machine, which is a lot more safe than some of the other dragons here. I think if you would ask Gunnar, I think he might say it's too unreliable as I need to play 5 cards. And this might just sit in my hand without being able to be played as such a card. Um, but I like it as a defensive option. 2 might be more correct than 3, but cancels are good. So I'm not going to harp on that one. Yeah, chat also saying like being able to play the card is probably better. Choosing the clarity of purpose for another stand is interesting. It definitely helps a bit with the weakness which Gunnar decks had, which is he doesn't stand, and if you can cancel the stand in some scenarios, you can get a good piece of tempo off. But yeah, some interesting choices here. Um, it is it has some like really nice um yeah, it has some interesting choices like the dragon tattoo, but I don't know, is the dragon tattoo then better than that's the second way of the dragon? Um Not sure. It allows you to replay a card which just have some value. Um and people need to keep their attachment removal generally for the acolytes. Hmm. Potential. Um I'm not sure about the clarity of purpose. I can see use for some of them. If you think that if cancels and events are going to be more prominent, then yeah, maybe. Um, and it's something you can proactively play in political conflicts, which you can, of course, most of the time choose. But for example, this would allow me to potentially get a military poke off, and then I kind of negated the clarity of purpose in some case. But okay, it's an option. I think I like the Pathfinder's Blade over to clarity of purpose, personally. Um, yeah, yep. Okay, and then our finalist. Via Kaiko. By the way, big thanks to Kaiko for the event once again. Um, and also Gunnar, who just rode up. Who actually wrote up his games. Wow, that is interesting. So if you want a full report on if you want a full report on how the turns went, he actually noted them down. Holy shit. I don't know if it was Gunnar or Kaiko, but or if like Gunnar gave Kaiko a write down, but you have a full overview if you want to look it up. Now, okay. Good attack. Aside from the other ones, when Seeker of Earth has like a defensive province in Kozu's Greeting, has a 5 power upholding authority, and plays Cycle of Vengeance. By the way, I like Cycle of Vengeance probably more than Feast of Famine. But the honor could sometimes be not used because of Swell of Sea Foam or something. So sometimes the steel might be better. Here we also see the Fortunist. Here we see Trimia Mystic. So yeah, this is something Kommel and Luis were better prepared for the mirror with Trimia Mystic, and Luis even added 3 disciples, which I think is probably too much. The Mia Mystics are probably just better at that point. And then maybe find some good cards, like I think Gaijutsu has a one-off here and no Gaijutsu here. So yeah, I think Gaijutsu is a potential better include than Disciple of Shinsei. But definitely the Mia Mystics for the mirrors are welcome and needed. Now Gunnar decides, okay, I'm going to play Duelist Training, 2 of, and Pillow Book as a 2 of, so go with Crane. Problem which I had against Gunnar in my game is that I couldn't dishonor Izumitsu, so my 3 Voice of Honor, which I had in hand, turn 1, were off. But also, because I misplayed the 1 chord games in my hand, I should have dishonored Izumitsu. But I was like playing around Swell, I think, and waiting for it. And then he was honored, and then I was like, okay, does he have the second Swell? Can I play the chord games to dishonor him now, or will it not work? But I should have dishonored him and then played Voice only Swell. But the Pillar Book, what it allows in 1 conflict, it is 1 of your cards, and allows you to play a second card from top of your deck. Because most of this deck is very playable, like just from in any situation. Of course, it won't always hit, but so it's 2 cards, and then in subsequent turns, it's alternate card draw, right? And another card to play in the conflict. And then Kommel's Earth Roll goes to Asceticism as a defensive option, which I like the idea of. I think having a defensive option like this is definitely worth it and a good thing to have. Like our other Phoenix Splash Dragon player, Antonio, with Mushinoshin. Asceticism has the upside that it stops a lot all the time. The problem is it is turn-offable fairly easily, in my opinion. In some decks, of course. What it does mean is you need to poke Resto and Upholding and another province, or like one of those provinces and 2 other provinces, which slows your conquest game plan down, which, given how, even if Mitsu isn't there turn 1, could slow you down enough to give Mitsu time to come there without being broken on the stronghold. So I'm kind of torn. I like that it's like a catch-all defensive card, but I can also very easily turn it off by turn 2. So, from what I heard from Gunnar, he's very happy with it. It like stops midnight revels or some of those things. It can completely stop any like sort of control from a Scorpion, for example. But again, I think Scorpion should have enough options to scout by turn 2, 3 provinces without breaking Resto or Upholding. So That's why I'm not like a huge fan of the card. Um, but yeah, um, it doesn't really separate a whole lot. I think the duelist training and the pillar books play well into the game plan. I think the duelist training is a good defensive option. I think, and a very interactable sort of thing, which the other decks kind of miss on top of the cards they already have. Because Gunnar is a very good player. Something that did happen though, for example, Gunnar didn't run into any crab. And as I went over, I think a crab deck with um, a crab deck with a student and Way of the Crab is probably a pretty big nightmare against dragon players still. So, but looking back at it, that might have cost him like one win in the Swiss, but it would depend on the top cut really. Suka's deck would look like a nightmare matchup for this deck. I do agree. It has like the one-off card in the Cleanse the Empire, which could remove Mitsu. It has Way of the Crab. It has like yeah, here it was. Yes, two assassinations. It has Earth becomes Sky, and then the Mitsu doesn't have a proactive stand. So you need to then Hark Tattoo or Favorable Ground Mitsu in, watering him. Hope he doesn't have a second like Earth becomes Sky, and then you can Swallow Seafoam and start from there. But that requires the Hark Tattoo or the Favorable Ground. So yeah, a crab deck like Suka's would have, like if you would play like 10 matchups, it would probably be like an A2 matchup for Suka's deck, I would estimate. Um, yeah, which is something that Gunnar said. Like, if I found like one of the two crabs in Top Cut, the Berserker crab it only has one way of the crab. It doesn't have like the student. I would have to see how this matchup would go. But a crab deck like Suka's deck would probably deal with it very well. Yeah, the Berserkers he probably just Voice Fist. I think the Berserkers, due to how many like real power cards they have at the start, might out might just out tempo Mitsu if he doesn't have the fate for it. But I because the Berserkers went keeper, they also lose they either lose tempo by running into Restore or Upholding by not wanting to break them, or they have to break them and lose a lot of cards, which I think isn't very good for the Berserkers. I would have If I were the Berserkers, I think I would have. Yeah, I think I would be able to like drop Crisis Breaker for Pathfinder's Blade, and Defend Your Honor would be the tougher sell. Um, but yeah, just because Dragon's Bro exists in the meta, even though I think you can play around it if your deck is built to play around it. I don't think an aggressive deck like the Berserker deck can without Province Denial. And also the Berserker deck, it doesn't have like any of the alternate like crab cards like the Jaden Late Katana or the Tetsubo to um maybe remove the fate of the Mitsu after their Pathfinder's Blade get let go. So no, I do think the Berserker deck would be pretty bad into the Mitsu deck. I use the splash crane for highlight the flaws and above question in what deck? Twin Soul Temple Phoenix. Yeah, I mean highlight the flaws is probably most reliable card because they don't have cancels. So probably better than Pathfinder's Blade if you don't want to go into like Seeker, and you probably are going fire for. I mean, yeah, fire out of Twin Soul Temple is still good with the the attachment removal. I forget the name. The fire restricted card. But yeah, Sanguine Mastery, right? But yeah, Gunnar went undefeated, 10-0. So that was the end of it. I got my final thoughts on the Dragon deck. I think it's baseline hard if you have zero interaction with Fate in some sort of way, or with maybe setting a character skill or removal. Then I think it's really hard to deal with the Dragon deck. But even without that, if you have some access to cancel, if you can out tempo it, maybe you have some province denial for the restoring the upholding. I think this deck is perfectly beatable. Hell, I could have perfectly beat it with yesterday on stream. Yeah, yesterday on stream with the crane deck I put together. If I would just had more experience and said, oh yeah, even in this take up command crane deck I have, I should play Noble Sacrifice, because I could have dishonored Bedmitsu perfectly fine. But I mean, I'm not a perfect deck builder, and of course, it was a bit of a meme last minute deck to play with Crane. But I think the Mitsu deck is beatable. Like, definitely, even a Phoenix player had a really good chance to beat Gunnar in Zaragoza. Like, no questions asked. If he had the Trick of the Light in hand, he would have won the game. He would have dishonored Gunnar. And even without it, technically Gunnar was on like I think 5 honor and had one card left in his deck. So if it would have gone one turn later, he would have naturally lost, even without Trick of the Light. So I think this deck is fine. It's definitely a deck to beat. It's a deck to keep in mind, but because it runs out of resources, because you can fight for those resources, because it doesn't stand out of its own, this is a very good but ultimately fair deck. And that's my take on High House of Light, Mitsutu, Dragon. And this is somewhat the end of the stream. I've actually been talking for about 3 hours. Wow. Holy fucking shit. That's amazing. So yeah, I enjoyed the hell out of myself at the Kotei. I I hope we can keep doing these in some sort of manner. Um, when Emerald Legacy comes out with the new stuff, and we can have in-person organized play events. They might not be super organized, and I mean there might need to be a lot of there's of course going to be a lot of self-printed stuff we have to do, but we can probably keep the community going, and I hope we do. And yes, it was a lot of decks to get through. 13 to be exactly. Although, of course, the House of Light was groupable, and the Unicorn deck was somewhat groupable. Yeah. I got a lot of ideas of Lion decks that I want to build and try. Like I said, my deck, I definitely want to try different stronghold, and maybe I can do something weird with a restricted card, like try contested countryside or maybe even keepers. Although the keepers I have reserved for a Lion Swarm deck, which I'm going to build. Um, all in all, what is still to highlight of some cards? By the way, battlefield orders. This card has some cute implications. You can kill Steadfast Witch Hunter with it by making the crab resolve the Steadfast Witch Hunter um, if it's the only character in play. Doesn't happen very often, but that's something Gunnar taught me. You could potentially use this on a Lion Sprite Brawler if it's the only standing character to make it bow itself. Those sort of things. Really cool card. But yeah. Um, I mean, I think the event was great. I think I didn't manage to play all the clans, but I think the clans are in a pretty good place. Of course, we some clans are still a little bit limited in how they can branch in their deck building, but I think as 3D Cube showed with his Phoenix deck, there's there's a lot of things you can do which don't come to mind at the beginning, but give you some other options. I think the sad thing is I think clans like Crane and when I say Lion, Lion has a lot of dynasty and conflict side because they got like I think the best like design spread, but their strongholds suck. They are like not suck, but the strongholds suck in terms of deck building variety. They don't like Maheke no Shiro, okay, is a ready effect for your two coster, which are only bushy, which are already your best two costers. So why is it limited like that? And Kyuden Koma, while a very, very good stronghold, it doesn't immediately lend itself to any specific Lion game plan except on a Lion. So, yeah. And then Crane has something for towers, and that's it for the dual towers. Like the honor Crane stronghold is not good enough for an honor running stronghold, and it doesn't provide any meaningful things aside from if Crane would suddenly get a lot of tools which cost a lot of honor but are very good. Something like that. Phoenix has a lot of choice with Twin Soul Temple, Shirogisu, even Kyuden Isawa, and Isawa might say like Phoenix has stronghold choice enough. But They could use still like maybe use another like direction for the bushy. Crab could always be a little bit more fleshed out, but the Berserker are a good aggressive archetype if you want to play that. I think not like great, but playably good. And Crab, of course, has his various control decks with Cute and Hida, and they're good options. Scorpion, Cute and Mayushi is a very good stronghold. Has good synergy with what they do, but their sort of teams might also blend a little bit too much into each other. But there's Conquest and Dishonor. You'll have to look into Dishonor. It's not Auto Dishonor as of course it was 3 years ago, but it will probably still exist. But you have to keep in mind something like Mitsutu in the meta, which makes it more difficult. And who haven't we had? Well, Dragon is of course limited. Even the Niten Master, like side Mirumoto, like Mirumoto side, is still playing Void Fist and part of the Monk package, so that's kind of weird. They are probably like dynasty wise and like team wise the most limited. Although there's some cute stuff with Shirokitsuki and some of the investigator stuff you can do, but it's still very much underdeveloped and underpowered in some ways. So yeah, that's sort of my idea on the meta. That's sort of my idea on these decks. Hopefully, for the people that watch this or have watched this, I've been some sort of enlightenment or education or just a fun watch. I think I'm going to call it here. Thank you all for who joined me and who watched. Hope you all had a good time. I think keeping this at 3 hours is probably good. All right. This was once again Komotomoya. Happy to bring you some L5R content. I'll try to do a deck of my Take Up Command Crane for the Landfall tournament. But that will probably wait until the tournament is fully finished or in the top cut. And I'll try to like do some Lion deck decks with things I have in mind. They will probably be under-tested, but I'll try to make them interesting at least. Alright. Thank you all for watching. It's been a pleasure. Become it on my out.